lot of Pokemon.
Right, so we're kind of throwing back to our 2015 format a little bit with the introduction of all that new stuff that Sun and Moon brought us, and Ultra Moon also brought us some pretty cool stuff. So kind of like a blending of the old and the new a little bit as we go back into our open National Dex format.
Yeah, a lot of players are really excited. There were some conflicted opinions on VGC 2016 and 2017 as well. It didn't feel the same without the Mega Evolution or without those conventional Pokemon like Kangaskhan, Heatran, Landorus that so many were used to running in 2014 and 2015 mainly. That VGC 2018 kind of feels like a return to home for a lot of our players.
Right, and a return to home in addition to some new tools that all of those those old favorites got. They all now have terrains that they can select from. Pokemon can run seeds are a popular item in the early season. We do have some new, trick room setters, some new fake out users, a whole bunch of new stuff that kind of gave it's like a Swiss Army knife that was kind of handed off to some of those old Pokemon and has definitely improved their position overall.
Right. If you thought Arcanine running a Super Recovery Berry was going to be prominent, wait till you see Cresselia running Wiki Berry. So our players are going to get into action as they're getting set up here. We have two very prominent players.
Very prominent players.
Excuse me, in Justin Carris and Aaron Traylor. So that as they get set up, we'll just talk about some of their accomplishments. Justin is a New York, New Jersey region-based player, and he got top 8 at Worlds in 2016. Excuse me, if you want to take over.
Yeah, so like you said, Justin is a local player, and of course Aaron is from a little bit more north of here, Massachusetts, and has come down for the event. And he also has Top Cut of Worlds, has Top Cut Nationals, and both of these players are constantly in top cuts of like pretty much every event that they show up to. Just like a phenomenal matchup for round 1 of 2 Worlds Top Cut players.
Absolutely, you're going to be hard pressed at any local tournament you go to below the regional level to have a better round 1 than we have here today.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be interesting to see what players are running in this format early on. If they're just going to go for crazy techs like a Mega Lopunny, or if they're just or they'll use conventional things just to start out, get a little championship points early on, and then have more fun later in the format. So that's what I'm excited from all of our players.
Right, and I think one thing to keep in mind is at this point in the format, anything that you can call conventional is it's a very loose term, conventional, when we've only had, about a month of the format so far, so not even a month, about a week of the format, but players have been playing it for a little bit.
They've been theory crafting.
So everything that, you can say is standard, you really have to take with a grain of salt because, you can look at usage stats and all this, but we've had, 2 or 3 live events in the world so far to allow for any of these, the metagame and Pokemon combinations and cores to stabilize themselves. So there's going to be some stuff we see today that we'll say, oh, that's pretty standard stuff, or, oh, that's a common combination. But is it really?
Well, I mean, after all the years of seeing Landorus at this point, you kind of, anything is running.
Right.
Well, I am excited to see how the Guardian Deity Pokemon interact with this new format.
Right.
Because a lot of people will say, oh, this is just 2015 with Z-moves. Well, it's not really. There's new move tutors like Ally Switch. There's Stomping Tantrum, which is a force to be reckoned with in this format.
Yep.
And, of course, the Tapu Pokemon, with all of them with Psychic Terrain. Not only did the Mega Evolution speed change, but Psychic Terrain with Mega Metagross, that made it even more viable. So what's great about VGC 18 as of right now is there are a lot of Mega Pokemon to choose from, and I'm sure a lot of our players here in Brooklyn are, it's not just Kangaskhan and Salamence.
Yeah, 100%. And between Generation 6 and 7, there were some nerfs that were handed out a little bit. Parental Bond was knocked down a little bit. Aerolate, Pixelate, all of those really important abilities that really defined VGC 2015 have been taken down a peg, and it's opened up a lot of possibilities for new Mega Pokemon, new regular non-Mega Pokemon that are able to be used in a little bit more prominence because those big, powerful neutral threats. Rain to its advantage.
Right, the Rain core's definitely got a boost with Tapu Koko, as he can use 100% accurate Thunders in Rain, and many players are opting early on in this format to use Gigavolt Havoc with their Tapu Koko, so that's their Z move. So a Thunder does a lot more damage after with the Z move compared to, say, Thunderbolt that we saw in VGC 17.
Right, absolutely.
Justin on top leads Tapu Koko and Gothitelle, as Aaron Traylor on the bottom has the Mimikyu lead, and I'm sorry, I can't.
Right, and on Justin's side of the field is kind of like
Amoonguss,
one of the safer leads that you can run with a team. Tapu Koko can very comfortably find itself sitting next to a Trick Room setter early in the game and has the option to go for a Volt Switch while Trick Room goes up. But in response to that, Aaron is very ready for any Trick Room that Justin sets.
Incineroar coming in here, switching into that Tapu Koko slot as Gothitelle protects. So very, very passive turn from Justin. Very aggressive for Aaron, freely setting up Swords Dance right now. So Mimikyu's attack is now boosted by 2 stages. And Amoonguss Sludge Bomb into Incineroar doesn't do a lot of damage, but more importantly, it gets the poison on Incineroar.
Right, and Aaron put Justin in a pretty tough position on that first turn with his lead. Justin very wary. Usually Gothitelle likes to be setting Trick Room almost immediately when it's out on the field, but you can't do that when you're staring down an Amoonguss because it instantly becomes the slowest thing on the field, and if that terrain that Justin has up ever goes away, everything is going to sleep. So Aaron taking advantage of that position that he put Justin in, getting free damage onto one slot and setting up Swords Dance on his Mimikyu.
Justin revealing all 4 of his Pokemon here in the first 2 turns. Mawile, which we presume will be Mega Mawile, comes out, intimidating both of Aaron's Pokemon. So now the Mimikyu is only at +1 increased stages of attack. As we have our first Z move of 2017 here in the Liberty Guard. 2018, excuse me. Still thinking about it. And it is a doozy. This is a wonderful, adorable, long animation. Mimikyu got a buff here with his own Mimikyu Z move. Let's snuggle forever.
And Mimikyu is ready to snuggle forever. It has a Swords Dance boost, and even though it was intimidated once, it does still have +1 stage of attack. And that Mawile is going to get snuggled aggressively, as Mimikyu is going to do a lot of damage. Because Mawile, before it Mega Evolves, really just doesn't have a lot of the stats to be a safe switch in, and Mimikyu just did a ton of damage with the resisted Z move there.
Wow, bringing Mawile down into the red, and he's already threatened for next turn when it does potentially Mega Evolve.
Oh, the burn.
Flare Blitz from Incineroar goes into the Mimikyu, but because of Mimikyu's disguise ability, it doesn't take any damage, but it does get burned. There is, of course, that chance to burn, so I think Justin feels kind of vindicated since he was poisoned that it's all right that Mimikyu got burned.
Right, and I think it's already a pretty questionable position for both players right now. We just saw that huge Z move do a ton of damage, but now that Mimikyu's burned, it might not be able to pick up the knockout on Mawile next turn, even though it will be faster than it. Amoonguss is in a little bit of a pickle right now, might have to think about withdrawing from the field because that Incineroar will be able to one-hit KO with the Flare Blitz, barring something like an Akaberry on it. So both players, this game is by no means over, even though that Let's Snuggle Forever was huge.
Justin switching out Mawile, I think he understands that at how low of health it has right now, it's really not going to do much in Game 1, so he's preserving it for a later Intimidate, which definitely could work against the Snorlax. But Incineroar's Flare Blitz into the Mimikyu, no disguise this time, is enough for a knockout. So Incineroar is going to take a lot of recoil damage, plus adding on the poison damage, so he is almost down.
Right, and it looks like Aaron was going for a Trick Room there, as he was moving Mimikyu being a naturally faster Pokemon. Barring these Pokemon being trained very differently than we usually see them, Aaron was almost definitely trying to set a Trick Room there as he was bringing in Snorlax. And it's cool to see that we do have that Mimulax coming back, a very popular 2017 core, and I believe was popularized on stream in this very room about a year ago.
I believe so. I remember that event. But what we also saw was Incineroar running a Figgy Berry, so that it's going to recover, or it did recover 50% of its HP, so Justin wasn't afraid to Flare Blitz and take all of that recoil damage because he's actually healthier now than when he started last turn.
Right, and this Incineroar is still putting on a pretty good amount of pressure. Incineroar is going to be moving before both of the Pokemon Aaron has on the field, and it hasn't been intimidated. It's still at full power, can do a ton of damage to both Pokemon, and Amoonguss wants none of that right now.
So we're going to have Justin breaking out his Z move in retaliation, and that is the Gigavolt Havoc that we were talking about in Team Preview. So many Tapu Kokos early on in this format need that extra damage, and Tapu Koko is supplying it.
Right, and like you mentioned, Joe, this is really one of the most, I believe, the most common item that we see on Tapu Koko early in the format. Back in 2017, we used to see it running all sorts of things with the Life Orb and the Assault Vest, the Focus Sash, but 2018 is very heavily defined by Electrium Z on Tapu Koko.
Double target from that Z move and Flare Blitz into Snorlax, but because of the Figgy Berry, it is not able to knock out Snorlax. High horsepower connects on Tapu Koko, but just leaves him down in the red. Not a one-hit knockout here. So next turn, Justin, with his faster Pokemon, can do more damage before it goes down.
And we're seeing Incineroar do a lot of work here. It is clicking Flare Blitz turn after turn after turn. It's doing damage to, it did a ton of damage to Mimikyu. It's hitting that Snorlax really hard. And it's not even going to be stopped this turn from clicking Flare Blitz again, should it want to. So it looks like Justin really has his choice of knockout here almost, depending on what Aaron's last Pokemon is.
Right, because Amoonguss can go for a potential Rage Powder, but it would be hit by a super effective Flare Blitz, and the Snorlax's health is too low to try to set up if it is potentially trying to increase its attack that way. Aaron Traylor revealing his fourth Pokemon, being that Charizard there, so most likely his Mega Evolution. Have to determine if it is Charizard Y or Charizard X. Incineroar making the right call, or actually going into what was Amoonguss here, but is resisted on Charizard, so he's still above 50% HP, and the attack goes into Tapu Koko's Protect.
All right, and I think Aaron was almost hoping to get his Snorlax knocked out there. I think he would have been in a much better position on this turn should he have had Amoonguss switching in for free into that slot as opposed to his Snorlax still alive. Because Amoonguss is going to do a lot of work against Justin's team once that Incineroar is off the field. So right now, it's not safer to be on the field, and that Tapu Koko is heavily threatening Charizard.
Charizard does not Mega Evolve, and Tapu Koko's Thunder goes straight into that Protect. Low kick from Incineroar, super effective, will knock out the Snorlax. So maybe Justin wanted to know how much that damage is going to do. Incineroar gets knocked out here, and this could be time for Mawile to switch back in and try to get an Intimidate. But maybe Aaron sees this as a rough match and doesn't want to reveal if he's Charizard Y or Charizard X.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I think he's definitely still in this game. I think here he's able to, wick away any attack that Tapu Koko wants to throw at Charizard with that Amoonguss. As we know, it's not something like a Safety Goggles. We saw the Electrium Z. So something like a Rage Powder plus any sort of spread fire attack, should he be carrying that Heat Wave, would be a good play for Aaron here. I'm not 100% sure, depending on how the two Pokemon are trained, whether or not he can take a two-hit knockout on that Gothitelle. I think I'd be surprised to see it at this point, with Gothitelle being a pretty specially defensive Pokemon. But Justin, whose team is very heavily focused on trying to set Trick Room at some point in the game when he brings Mawile, is not going to be able to happen with that Amoonguss still sticking around.
Tapu Koko switching out, Justin understanding that he does not want Amoonguss to be able to put anything to sleep. So potentially sacking off his Mega here in Mawile, getting an Intimidate off that really might not matter if both of Aaron's Pokemon are special attackers. So, and that is the case. Charizard will break out its Charizard Y form. So it's going to set up the Sun, increasing all of its Fire-type attacks with that Drought ability. But if he went for a Heat Wave, the Mawile is going to go down anyway. But Gothitelle protects, expecting potentially a lot of damage going into it this turn. Amoonguss with the Rage Powder, but there is no attack from Justin's end on this turn, so that's not going to matter. Heat Wave is able to connect on the Mawile. That will knock it out, but Justin, that's actually what he wanted, so Tapu Koko can come in back next turn, set up Electric Terrain, and Amoonguss can't put anything to sleep.
Right, and it does look like that was his priority there, was making sure that Electric Terrain was back on the field. And neither of those two Pokemon that Justin had out there the previous turn, the Mawile or the Gothitelle, barring some sort of a tech like a Thunderbolt on Gothitelle or like a Rock Slide on Mawile, have any way of dealing with Charizard. So that Tapu Koko is Justin's way of dealing with Charizard in the end game here. So he wants to make sure that the electric terrain is on the field to make sure that Amoonguss can't do anything, and make sure that his only way left of dealing with Charizard is still alive. And because of that, Mawile was the one that had to, give itself away in order for Justin to have some sort of a chance here in the end game.
But if Tapu Koko only had Thunder as its option, it wouldn't have a reliable way of knocking out the Charizard, even though it's super effective. Another Rage Powder from Amoonguss. That seems like Aaron's really only option right now is to Rage Powder some attacks away. But Heat Wave in the sun will do not enough damage, what it looks like.
Oh, a Payapa Berry.
To the Gothitelle. Payapa Berry on Amoonguss, that will hurt, or that will neuter the potential amount of damage a Psychic attack would do, similar to the Shucka Berry that Heatrans commonly run. Not the most common move or item on Amoonguss there, but it was effective.
Right, and I think Justin's out here towards the end of the game is going to have to be multiple protects on Tapu Koko, but he's not going to go for that right now. I think he's going to take Dazzling Gleam damage and hope that maybe he can knock out Amoonguss with a Psyshock after some chip.
So that's Hidden Power. It's super effective. It could be fire. Most Tapu Kokos tend to run fire over ice, so that's probably what Tapu Koko had. It does go down from the Heat Wave, but Justin loses his Tapu Koko in the process. Gothitelle will recover its HP, but Psyshock, no Payapa Berry this time, will knock out Amoonguss, so it's down to the Charizard and Gothitelle.
Right, so I actually think that is a Hidden Power Ice. Because we're back to kind of like a Landorus Salamence format, Tapu Koko has gone back to running Hidden Power Ice as its Hidden Power of choice. And it was, a good play by Justin, I think, overall. But I think maybe that reveal of information was kind of unnecessary, given that the end game for him is a little bleak right now. It's going to be, he's going to need a lot of, something like a Heat Wave miss to have any chance of getting out of this with his Gothitelle against a Charizard Y in the sun.
Right, Gothitelle really not known, similarly to Cresselia, not known for
an overheat.
Its offensive prowess. Overheat, single target, does connect in the sun, knocks out Gothitelle, and Aaron comes back from an early deficit, but he's able to win game one here in round one.
Right, and I think both players, that game was really important for both players on as far as the information game goes and kind of the play style that both players are looking for. Both Aaron and Justin know that right now that Amoonguss is a big problem for Justin. And if Justin is going to play with his Incineroar like he did that previous turn, he's not going to keep it around to deal with Amoonguss, which is really kind of like the turning point for the matchup, I think, at this game. He's got to get a Flare Blitz off onto Amoonguss at some point to have a good way of dealing with it. Because otherwise, Gothitelle is going to Psyshock, it's going to activate the Payapa Berry, and it's going to take a couple turns to get it off the field, and it can do a lot of damage if there's no electric terrain.
Justin needs to find a way to preserve his Mega Mawile better, as it switched in and immediately took the Z move from Mimikyu that brought it down. It did over 90% of its damage already because it didn't have its boosted stats from being a Mega Evolution. So if Justin can get Mawile to come in clean and not on a switch in, that might be another possible out for him in game two.
Yeah, it's definitely something he can look at. And unfortunately for this matchup for Justin, because the two Mega Evolutions and a lot of the things on Aaron's team match up very well against Mawile, and because, a lot of the speeds of the Pokemon that are on both teams are sitting very close to each other, it's kind of an awkward place for Mawile to be sitting. Because if the Trick Room's up, it's going to get all of its attacks kind of wicked away by a Rage Powder. But if that Trick Room is not up, it's going to take, it's going to get one-hit knockout by that Charizard.
Justin leads Tapu Koko Incineroar, and Aaron has the Mimikyu and Amoonguss set. So electric terrain will be set up here. Does Amoonguss stay in and go for that Rage Powder automatically? Like, this seems like a very easy Rage Powder, let's snuggle forever turn for Aaron.
Yeah, it could be, and I think Aaron might even be, I mean, the Rage Powder is going to be a little sketchy because, as we just talked about in the pregame, the Incineroar Amoonguss dynamic is very important going into this game too here. Aaron's going to be very careful with his Amoonguss unless he's trying to make a hard read, which, Justin called a couple times to protect on Amoonguss and target the other slot. But Aaron's got to be very careful with the Amoonguss, and Justin needs to make sure that Flare Blitz is getting into Amoonguss in order to make his mid to late game much, much safer. And of course, this Mimikyu is kind of like an X factor going on the field right now. We saw what it did in game one.
Amoonguss Rage Powder here Tapu Koko with the Dazzling Gleam that will break Mimikyu's disguise. So that's really all he was going for this turn. Not a lot of damage coming out from a spread move in Dazzling Gleam, and Amoonguss resisted. Play rough onto Tapu Koko, but without the Swords Dance boost and without its Z move, does not do as much damage as it could, only around 50%. Flare Blitz will one-hit the Amoonguss, and that goes down, so no more Rage Powder for the rest of the game.
Yeah, that's a big important thing going down the stretch here. And we talked about, Joe, how that Amoonguss was really the thing that was preventing Justin from setting up his end games how he wanted, and now it's off the field on turn 1. I think maybe what Aaron was going for was trying to catch Justin not targeting Amoonguss like he did a couple times in game 1. Both players know that Amoonguss is really important, and it looks like Justin was the one that called that little mind game that was going on between both players correctly on turn 1.
And with Aaron bringing out his Charizard, when it Mega Evolves into Charizard Y, it will set up the Sun. So Incineroar's Flare Blitz will do even more damage and will most likely one hit the Mimikyu there. And all that recoil damage, as we saw in Game 1, Justin can eat that back up and recover it with his Figgy Berry. So this might be another free Flare Blitz from Justin. But Mimikyu sees that coming and switches out into the Snorlax slot, which is a lot bulkier, as Charizard does set up the Sun here with its Mega Evolution.
Right, and Charizard is going to bring out the Sun here and maximize its special attack stat. This is kind of the first time we've seen throughout the series so far Justin have his Tapu Koko in position to threaten Charizard with a Thunderbolt. So we'll have to see how these players are going to play around that.
Tapu Koko protecting on this turn as Charizard goes for a Heat Wave. It is only going to hit onto Justin's Incineroar, which is resisted, so it does not do too much damage there. Incineroar, Flare Blitz with the Sun boost into Snorlax is going to do over 50% there. Doesn't knock itself out, which is great for Justin, as he can eat its Figgy Berry now and go back to over 50% HP.
Yeah, and that Incineroar is still healthy. It's in position to be firing off, continued Flare Blitzes while the Sun is up. Aaron's going to be hard-pressed to deal with the Incineroar at this point, and like we saw in Game 1, Flare Blitz after Flare Blitz after Flare Blitz, and Aaron doesn't have a ton to deal with this right now, and might just have to kind of play his endgame by hoping it knocks itself out eventually.
Right. Justin might have to go for a double target on this turn if Charizard is expecting the Thunder to go into it. He definitely needs the Thunderbolt Flare Blitz to knock out Snorlax, but he's actually going to use his Z move here. So Tapu Koko, with all that big damage, we saw it use it last time, not enough for a knockout on its own, but will do a lot of damage on that Snorlax. Could go into the Charizard, though.
Yeah, it might have just been a safe kind of Gigavolt Havoc into the Charizard to make sure that he knocked out the Mimikyu, too, should that have switched in. But he's actually just going to try and get rid of that Snorlax. In the electric terrain, I think it's going to be close. Oh, and it does knock out Snorlax.
That most Snorlax, they're trying to support it, or trying to endure that. Maybe they're used to that last year, but Tapu Koko, remember, it has Thunder on this set, not Thunderbolt, so that's automatically more powerful than most Tapu Koko Snorlaxes are used to facing off against. Flare Blitz resisted onto Charizard, still does over 50% HP, and Aaron is now down to Charizard Mimikyu, and we know the Mimikyu will be one hit from the Flare Blitz, and Charizard, a Flare Blitz will do over 50% as it did last turn, so Justin in a commanding position as Gothitelle switches in.
Right, and this game is definitely not over yet. As we saw, Aaron is able to deal with that Gothitelle in isolation with his Charizard, and Mimikyu, I think, is going to be really kind of just on the cusp of being able to knock out Incineroar with a play rough. But of course, it does have this Let's Snuggle Forever available. So I think what we're going to see this turn is Aaron try and go for that knockout on Incineroar, because that's the big damage threat that's left, assuming that Mawwile's in the back, and then use Charizard. And if Mimikyu makes it through the turn, the Mimikyu to try and whittle away at the Gothitelle through the end game.
Justin thinking the same way as you, Brendan.
Oh, and it's Politoed.
Going into Politoed, so not Mawwile. That will set up the rain due to Politoed's drizzle ability. So now Charizard does not have an increase with its fire type attacks. Heat Wave is actually going to do 50% less damage because rain is up. So really, Gothitelle and Politoed can sit there for days not worrying about a Heat Wave, as Mimikyu goes for the Let's Snuggle Forever. This time Probably going to go into Incineroar, so a great call from Justin if he did switch it out and Politoed takes this instead.
Right, and I think regardless, Justin's adjustment to keep that Politoed in the back was a really good one. And with Gothitelle on the field, this is kind of his way through switching to deal with opposing Sun, which can otherwise give his team a lot of trouble. But when you're locked on the field with that Shadow Tag from Gothitelle, and then you bring the Rain in, there's nothing that Charizard can do. So Gothitelle here is going to be the second Pokemon on Justin's team to get snuggled this series, and is going to hang on with just a sliver of health.
Not enough snuggle power from Mimikyu. It recovers its health from that Iapapa Berry and sets up Trick Room. So now Gothitelle, a very slow Pokemon typically, will be faster than both of Aaron's Pokemon.
And excellently played by Justin here in the end game. I think everybody that's watching this stream was probably expecting that him to try and have that Mawile in the back, but like I was talking about a little bit, Mawile is not really the focal point of Justin's matchup against Aaron here, and he realized that in Game 1 and opted to bring his Politoed instead of his Mega in Game 2.
The Psychic Attack into Mimikyu, not enough for a knockout. Scald!
And the burn.
Mimikyu survives with hardly any HP, gets burned, so it will go down this turn, but it is able to get off a little bit of damage with that critical hit on Play Rough. Overheat onto the Gothitelle, will knock it out. So now Justin is down to his final two Pokemon, as Aaron, after Mimikyu goes down, will just have Charizard remaining.
Right, and I'm not really sure how Aaron gets out of this one, barring multiple protects here. What Aaron would really have to do is get enough protects to both stall out Trick Room and stall out the Rain. So it's a little bleak for him, especially because Justin has Fake Out pressure here. So he's got a free turn to just go for like a Fake Out plus a Scald. Alternatively, he could, if he has something like a Perish Song or some of those other things that Politoed is capable of doing, especially with a Trap, a Perish Song would end the game here too.
And Aaron actually forfeits Game 2. So we are going to have a Game 3. This set has been a lot of fun. So obviously Game 3 is going to keep up the intensity that we've seen in Game 1 and Game 2.
Hey.
Justin and Aaron. That way, he made adjustments. Obviously, the Mawile didn't help him in Game 1, so he switched that to Politoed, which is always a risk if you don't bring your Mega Pokemon in your set of 4. Mm-hmm. But besides that, the Tapu Koko still went for Gigavolt Havoc, Flare Blitz for days from Incineroar. So he still had the same tactics, but the only thing he changed was the Politoed and Mawile.
Right, and I think a lot of that game actually hinged on turn 1, where Aaron gave his Amoonguss away to the Flare Blitz from Incineroar. And sometimes experienced players, when you're up a game, you're going into Game 2, you think, hey, it's early in the game, let me make a hard read, and if I get it right, the series is over, right? I just take Game 2. But Justin was able to capitalize on Aaron trying to get maybe a little cute with that read, knocks out his Amoonguss, and now that we're in Game 3, Aaron doesn't really have the leeway to try and make hard reads like that early in the game. And if he plays a little bit safer than with his Amoonguss, I think we're going to see a very close Game 3 here.
Yeah, and if he brings, I think Aaron should probably make an adjustment with his lead 2 Pokemon, because I would assume Justin is going to bring Incineroar again and potentially lead. There was really nothing wrong with Justin's opening of Tapu Koko Incineroar, and that is what we're going to see again. So the only question is, does Aaron make an adjustment, because that opening has so much pressure from Justin's end that it can really target either Pokemon and come off okay. Aaron keeping with the same 2 Pokemon in Amoonguss and Mimikyu.
Right, and it's back to the Game 2 leads here, so Aaron's going to have to think pretty hard about what he does. I think the unfortunate thing about this position that Aaron kind of, with the Pokemon that he has, is he doesn't have anything that can switch very well into a Flare Blitz from Incineroar, right? He does have that Charizard, which can take it okay, but it's still going to take a lot of damage, and he has to deal with the potential for an electric type attack coming. But it looks like the adjustment for Aaron in Game 3 here is Landorus.
Stop your clocks, 1:33 p.m. Eastern, the first Landorus at a Liberty Garden event. So whoever had that, feel happy. Critical hit on Dazzling Gleam, not doing too much. Could potentially be an Assault Vest. I know that is a very common move, or a very common item, on Landorus so far early in BGC 2018. But Aaron's tried and true, 3 games in a row. Mimikyu just wants the cuddles, just wants to snuggle forever.
All right, and the turn 1 snuggle here, Aaron is wasting no time. We'll have to see what his target is here, but I already really like the Landorus adjustment here because like I was just talking about, he doesn't have too much that can switch into a Flare Blitz, and with that Intimidate, Landorus at least kind of gives him a little bit of wiggle room to kind of switch around a little bit more, and Aaron here is going to snuggle that Tapu Koko and try and just knock it right off the field. Will
it be enough for the one-hit knockout on Tapu Koko?
Oh, and it is!
No Swords Dance boost needed on this one, and that's great for Aaron for his Charizard, really, because Charizard is very threatened by the existence of Tapu Koko. Not there anymore. Flare Blitz onto Mimikyu is -1, but thanks to Dazzling Gleam, it busted its disguise, so it is actually able to take all that damage from Flare Blitz.
And a big day for Mimikyu here in Game 3, as it's able to pick up its first snuggling knockout, and it didn't get burned with the Flare Blitz. So Mimikyu finally in a position where it might be able to attack a second time in a game, this is a really good position for Aaron. But a Ludicolo is an interesting bring from Justin because that probably means that he brought his Rain fast mode, and that Landorus spring is looking a little bit more dicey here.
Yeah, Landorus does not want to see Ludicolo in any shape or form. Ludicolo is not as fast as it could be right now because the Rain is not set up, so it would take one more turn to get out there, and Landorus, I would assume, wants to switch out in this slot because Charizard can take an Ice Beam a lot better than Landorus can.
Right, but the one thing that Landorus, of course, does like to do a lot is U-turn, and Ludicolo is not very appreciative of U-turns. And I think this is Politoed, Justin going for his Rain mode.
Here it is, the first Rain of 2018, Politoed, Ludicolo. Been going strong for, at least half a decade at this point.
Yeah.
Nothing you gotta change out here. Fake out on to Landorus. So Aaron not switching out his Landorus.
Oh, Trick Room.
Great call from Aaron. So Mimikyu sets up Trick Room. Now all the slower Pokemon are going to move first. And Ludicolo is so fast that it's actually super slow.
Right, so we're going to see a lot of kind of interesting dynamics with all of the speeds that are going on here. So over the course of this past turn, we saw the Rain come out, we saw the Trick Room go up, and we also had a short period of time where neither of those things were on the field. So Ludicolo probably would have been slower than Landorus and prevented itself from taking anything like a Rock Slide or a U-turn. But the Rain coming up would have allowed it to be faster. Well, the Trick Room is now bringing everything back on its head, and Politoed is likely the slowest Pokemon on the field here.
Mimikyu switching out after it did its job. It set up Trick Room.
And the Amoonguss.
Into Amoonguss. Amoonguss with that Sludge Bomb, super effective onto Ludicolo. Scald, not enough for a knockout.
Oh, and no burn.
Onto Landorus. Knocking off Politoed's Wiki Berry, so it will not recover that HP. And a Scald onto Amoonguss, which is resisted there. So if Justin went for a double target as he lands a burn, he would have been able to knock out Landorus, but that would have been a very tough call to make, so I understand him not going for it.
All right, and we do see the pretty definitive reveal of the Assault Vest on Aaron's Landorus. They're able to take a Scald from a Water-type Pokemon in the Rain and live to knock off the Berry on the other side of the field. So a really good bring here. I think that Landorus is putting in a lot of work for Aaron.
Incineroar switching in to that Ludicolo slot. Amoonguss protects on this turn. So Politoed is slower, but he's not going to go for a Scald like he did last turn. It will actually go for a Protect. So another passive turn from Justin. Earthquake.
Oh, good Earthquake.
That's a great call from Aaron. He's making some excellent predictions here in Game 3 because Earthquake is super effective onto Incineroar.
Oh,
not enough
so
for a
close.
knockout. Thankfully
so
for
close.
Justin, he will recover its HP via the Figgy Berry here. But he can't take another Earthquake.
Right, he can't take another Earthquake, but Incineroar will be slower and therefore faster than Landorus in Trick Room. And that protects from Aaron's Amoonguss. Maybe, you wonder why the slowest thing is taking a turn to protect in Trick Room, but it did give him the opportunity to Earthquake, and it allowed Aaron to stall out a turn of Electric Terrain, which is still hanging around after Tapu Koko was knocked out. So I believe this is the last turn of Electric Terrain, and if it fades this turn, Amoonguss will be able to start doing what it's best known for.
What everybody used it for back in earlier formats, which is putting Pokemon to sleep. So I don't know how Landorus can survive out of this turn unless it switches out, but it doesn't look like he's going to go for that. Aaron will switch out his Amoonguss as Mimikyu comes in, potentially trying to take that fake out, which is exactly what he goes for. An encore from Politoed, just a really rough turn from Justin because the can't encore Mimikyu since it didn't have a move yet. And the Fake Out went into the Mimikyu slot, a Ghost-type Pokemon immune to the Fake Out. Earthquake goes off and takes many Pokemon out with that Earthquake.
Yeah, and Aaron just really won the hard read war there. I think Justin had a really good idea with the play he was going for, which was to prevent Amoonguss from moving because it's the slowest thing on the field, and then encoring it into the Protect from 2 turns ago because it hadn't gotten the opportunity to move as a result of the Fake Out. But instead, Aaron thinks, it looked like a pretty safe play to us, right? He takes advantage of Amoonguss's Regenerator ability, takes it off the field, and totally nullifies Justin's entire turn and knocks out his Incineroar.
And now he can get, he doesn't need to put anything to sleep at this point because he's in such a good position. A Sludge Bomb, honestly, from Amoonguss might just be the best play. Go for a Sludge Bomb into the Ludicolo as Landorus switches out, wanting it to get out of Trick Room eventually and be fast again. Ludicolo Fake Out into Amoonguss. Snorlax, the other Pokemon for Aaron, and Scald on Snorlax. Is there a burn? No, there is not a burn. The rain stops here. Eventually, Trick Room is going to go down, but this is rain teams without rain are not as effective, obviously.
Right. The rain teams without the rain are going to be very hard pressed to do any sort of damage to the Snorlax. One thing that we can look for is Politoed a little bit earlier in the season has been running stuff like Focus Blast, especially on specific rain teams that need a Snorlax check, so we'll see. But I guess no Focus Blast.
Scald Ice Beam from Justin, not doing a lot of damage, as much as he would like. Return knocks out Politoed, so now it is down to Ludicolo by himself against 3 Pokemon. Sludge Bomb onto Ludicolo does a good amount considering Amoonguss does not usually run investment. But most importantly, what really seals up Game 3 here is Aaron landing the poison.
Right. I think if nothing else, the poison was the final dagger in the game for Justin here. But really, there's nothing that Ludicolo by itself can do to handle the Snorlax and the Amoonguss. Snorlax, can start setting up if it has Curse or Belly Drum. It also has Recycle, and as the nickname implies, it eats, John. It can start to recycle constantly, and there's not enough damage that Ludicolo can do to remove it from the field.
Congratulations to Aaron Traylor winning round 1 against such a tough opponent. Both of our players here, we'll say he's an invader. At least he's still northeast, but he is invading the New York, New Jersey region. I'm happy we didn't even have to wait any rounds to see Mimikyu Z move. It's already out there.
Right, and we didn't have to wait any rounds to get a phenomenal matchup either. That was such a great match between these 2 players. Adjustments going back and forth, great plays being made by great players, and 2 really strong teams.
Right, so if round 1 is any indication of what you're going to see here from our Liberty Garden stream today, it's going to be fun. So we're going to be right back, setting up for round 2. We'll get that to you as soon as possible. So stay tuned. This is Liberty Garden.
Okay. Hey there, viewers. I'm Brendan Lewis. I'm back with the winner from round 1, Aaron Traylor, here at Liberty Gardens. Winter midseason, midseason, what are they, showdowns? Midseason showdowns, and here we are. We're here with Aaron, and like I said, he was the winner from round 1, and that was like an intense set, Aaron.
Yeah.
I wasn't really ready to start shouting in round 1, and my throat hurts a little bit.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I want to give you some backstory to that set.
Okay, give it to me.
So I'm exhausted, man. I got up at like 5 to come here. So Justin's making chit-chat at the start of the game, right? And he's like, buddy, have you done the Mimikyu side quest? Like, to get Mimikyu on Z. And now I knew that if I said yes, he'd have a good hunch as to what my Mimikyu item was. So, like, I didn't want to trick him, okay? Listeners, I did not want to trick him. But I just didn't know what's that. and he told me about it, and I was like, oh, that's cute. That sounds cute. And then turn 2 game 1 is like, Mimikyu time. And I never felt worse.
You got to do what you got to do, though. I think Justin, was very obviously going for the trick onto you, and you didn't trick him. You just weren't allowing yourself to be tricked.
Yeah,
I think that's fine.
I did the same thing that I would have done to anyone trying to get info on me before the game started.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my life.
All right, so a thing that Joe and I were talking about was kind of between game adjustments. I know you're tired, but I'm going to talk theory with you a little bit here.
Of course.
Game 3, you brought Landorus instead of Charizard, which is, to a lot of, when you think about a matchup against Rain, you think about wanting to make sure you have Sun in some way to get rid of it. So what were your thoughts behind the Landorus?
All right, my thought was that he was going to lead Rain because I had led the same thing each game, and it didn't work out for me the second time. And when that happens, I like to do it a third time. But I knew that Amoonguss Mimikyu was strong enough anti-Rain that I didn't need Charizard. I wanted Landorus for the Intimidate, and like midway through game 2, you can see like my eyes close and I start to fall asleep. That's me thinking about what's going to happen game 3.
Right.
And I knew that turn 1, he is going to try and knock out my Mimikyu. I wasn't sure if he was going to protect Tapu Koko or not. Yeah, so I planned that Lando switch in game 1, and I knew Snorlax would be bulky enough to take whatever he had.
Right, and it seemed like a phenomenal play to us at the time, revealing the Landorus, especially when it seemed like kind of in games 1 and 2, the game plan for getting rid of Incineroar was just allow it to Flare Blitz a bunch of times until you can like knock it out with literally anything else. So Landorus, a pretty good bring there.
Yeah.
So you took down a really good player in round 1. You're really tired. How are you feeling about going forward here in the tournament?
Oh man, I don't know. I just I can't decide between I just want to go to bed and I just want to win my games. I think I'm gonna do both.
Do both, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my favorite photos of me playing this game is Doug Borsoli and